The past 2 years have been all about distance, limitations, and restrictions. The topic we are going to address today is all about connections, building bridges, and togetherness. Look at the world we live in over the past 2 years especially, and you will understand in no time at all that building meaningful connections has never been more important. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you're watching us from. Welcome. My name is Łukasz Ciochin. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be chairing this wonderful discussion with fantastic guests that we have brought together to talk about festivals. Even though most of our guests today represent international projects and festivals taking place in Kraków, our discussion will address topics and challenges faced by festivals all over the world. So let's jump right in and start with the customary introduction of our speakers. It's a beautiful day in Kraków today, which partly explains probably why some of our guest speakers are dressed in black. Let's start with Kathrin Deventer joining us from Brussels, I would imagine. Kathrin is Secretary General at the European Festivals Association. Are you joining us from Brussels indeed, Kathrin? Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
I do join you from Brussels indeed, and the weather here is as beautiful, or I hope at least as in Krakow.
Well, among the many achievements, I should also mention that Kathrin is the youngest and the first female Secretary General in an organization that can pride itself on 70 years of pedigree and legacy. So we are really thankful, grateful to you, Kathrin, for joining our discussion today. Here in Kraków at the Potocki Palace, I'm joined by Roberta Piaskowskiego, Kraków City Mayor's Plenipotentiary for Culture. Welcome, Robert.
Good morning, everyone.
We have Janusza Makucha, founder and director of the Jewish Culture Festival in Kraków. Welcome. We have Grzegorza Stępniaka, off-camera program director.
Hello, and thanks for the invite.
Hi, Grzegorz. Great to have you with us. We have Magdaleny Doksy-Tverberg, Kraków Festival Office director. Hi, Magdalena. Hello. We have Bartosza Szydłowskiego, artistic director at Łaźnia Nowa. Bartosz. And last but not least, we have Małgorzaty Płysy, Executive Director at the Unsound Festival. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Let's start with a quick round that will put things in context for our audience. And I decided to ask each and every one of our guests a rather simple question made of 3 questions, really. Why do you do what you do? What is it you do? And how you would describe your festival or the institution you work for? And it's one of those questions you may have heard hundreds of times in your life, I would imagine. But as we all know, sometimes the simplest of questions can be the most difficult ones. So let me make it a little bit more difficult for you and ask you to imagine it's a presidential debate, really, and you have only 90 seconds to answer this one question or 3 questions, depending on how you look at it. So why, what, and how you would describe it. I will literally be counting down the time. So who do we start with? Who would like to address this question? It's a round, so I will ask everyone. Kathrin, do you think we can start with you? You're watching us remotely, and that should be a really easy question for you.
Okay, time is running. Vote for me. I believe that people need to meet and meet other people that they don't know in order to be better people and perform, in a way, a better life and a better job. That's a choice I make, and that's why I do what I do. So second part of the question is what I do. I'm working for a network that connects other people, different people, the European Festivals Association. It brings together festival makers by now from all over the world with each other to talk with each other, but also with stakeholders around festival making. That include, for instance, cities, sponsors, and others that have a certain interest in the potential, let's say, of arts festivals. And how do we do this in IFA? We do this through creating encounters, like this one that you do there now in Krakow, by creating bridges. I use the same words as you did in the introduction. And we do this indeed now for more than 70 years, bringing the world of arts festival makers closer together, not only in the form of traditional membership, which IFA was for a long time, but also through really new initiatives for young festival managers, the FLabel project, the Festival Finder idea, Perform Europe, and also this very Festival Cities initiative that in a way produced as a first outcome something we will talk about today later on, the FSCL for Festival Cities and Regions, to which the city of Krakow greatly contributed in the past couple of weeks. And I'm happy to join this discussion here today. Vote for me.
And how impressive is that, ladies and gentlemen? Exactly 1 minute, 30 seconds. Now let it set the standard for the answer to this quick question made of 3 questions. Grzegorz, can we go next to you, perhaps?
Yes, sure. Well, I do what I do simply because I really love film and I like going to different film festivals. And I'm the programming director of MasterCard Off-Camera International Festival of Independent Cinema, which means I'm in charge of selecting films that are later shown in Krakow and coming up with like the artistic profile for each and every section of the festival. And my festival is mainly centered around promoting international and Polish films from young filmmakers, but it also tries to build and create a platform for kind of like networking between the Polish film industry and international film industry. And that's simply what I do and how I do it. So I go all year round to different film festivals. I try to choose as many good films as possible, and then later I try to introduce like the audiences here in Krakow to what's best in my, but also my programming team opinion in world cinema. Thank you.
Reminds one of Confucius and do what you love in life and you will never work a day in your life.
Well, at least I try to.
Sounds like your legacy, doesn't it?
A little bit maybe, yeah.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can ask you, Małgorzaty, you represent one of the strongest brands, international brands in the city. How would you respond to this question?
Well, I'm not running for office, so I'll try and be
Not
even
yet.
shorter. Not yet. Yeah, well, why I do it, I love music, I love experimentation, I love bringing people together, and I love to travel and look for inspirations in the weirdest, least comfortable places, and I feel like it's important to unite people and open them to different challenges, and that challenge could be music and art. And I think, yeah, looking for challenges in art and music is a way to make us better and experience culture in the widest form. So, yeah, and I do it by being a co-director of Unsound Festival, an international festival of music and contemporary arts, which is based here in Krakow, but it has also its satellite events in New York, Adelaide, and Warsaw, among others. So, and yeah, we're known for traveling around Europe and former Soviet Union as well, and bringing and fostering different cultural relations, networking as well. We're part of several platforms, and and we continue to do it that way. And and how I would describe it, it's a festival where you always look for something that you'll be surprised by. Open your eyes and open your ears, and I love to do it and seeing people's reactions and the way they respond to what we serve them in our curatorial platter.
Sounds interesting enough, thank you. And rumor has it you had quite an interesting start to your festival years and years ago. Read on the page that initially, because of the type of music you're focused on and develop, well, the start wasn't entirely as easy as one would expect.
No, that was at the beginning of the festival.
That may have been before you were born, actually.
No, that was at the beginning of the festival, which is turning its 20th anniversary.
Next year, right?
This year, actually.
This year already.
This year we have our 20th edition. But yeah, at the first year of Unsound, we were actually kicked out from a Krakow cellar. And and I feel like we sometimes are being kicked out of spaces up to today.
Rumor has it, at least in the global business world, that tends to have a really motivational impact on you and makes you come back much stronger if that happens.
That's why we work in culture.
Wonderful. Janusza Makucha, the legend of the Jewish Culture Festival, looking around him modestly. Could you please try and answer this question made of 3 questions? Why do you do what you do? What is it you do? And how would you describe the institution you represent after 31 years of delivering one of the best festivals in the world, I would imagine?
34, sir. 34.
34.
But I've never fought. I've never spend a minute to ask myself why, what's an interesting question. Let me sleep with that. But after 34 years, I understood that it is more than obvious that we must do this festival, especially here in Krakow. This is the festival which is deeply rooted in the so-called legacy and heritage of the Jewish culture left to us by Jews who lived here 750–800 years. And being aware of the so-called history, I understood many years ago that I have a choice to choose something between, to choose between death and life. Because we are overwhelmed by
It's a luxury choice to have, isn't it?
Yeah, but not exactly. We are overwhelmed by the history. We are victims of the history. I hate it. I have enough history. I don't believe, with all respect, Kathrin, and you, with some kind of a bridge of reconciliation. Bridge and bridges can be easily destroyed, and we are facing it every day. So what I'm focused on is rather creating the new value in our awareness through the living Jewish culture, because the Jews weren't born to be killed in Auschwitz-Birkenau. They were born to create their own phenomenal, diversified culture after 1935 in Israel. So that's why the festival is focused on Israel. So that's why I'm doing that, because I'm a part of this world. Second, because, that's what I said. The festival is actually never-ending educational process aimed at systematic transformation of Poles, Poles, Jews, and people, let's say, people of goodwill. That's it.
A lot of important topics to address later on in the discussion. Thank you very much, Janusz. Bartosza Szydłowski, Łaźnia Nowa, and Divine Comedy, one of the most iconic festivals this city has known.
So both and theater and festival are from the same source. That I do believe that theater is a very special mean platform tool to confront people with themselves and to encourage them to express themselves. I mean that expression is not coming only from the stage. The stage is just, and actors are just provoking a little bit this self-expressions of audience. So I also do it because I love theater people, and not only theater as an art field, but especially this energy, this critic thinking, this political attitude, clear, open-minded, and courageous gestures, which are full in Polish theater especially. So the festival is a celebration of some really sometimes annoying attitude, and this way that we are still trying to make us uncertain, not certain. So I think that this a little bit house of these 10 days in December are one of the most beautiful days in every year I spent, with so many factors, so many things were happening. What is important that I think about this festival from early beginning, to make it pragmatical as a big showcase of Polish theater, confronting with the international audience. Social, because we are full of audience, always sold out and very energetic with the relation. And also in symbolic way, that festival is always a little bit wider than what is happening during the festival. So we are sending a message around the Europe, around the Poland, what is exactly the topic. There is some kind of idiom every year, which is, focusing the energy and thoughts around who we are this year after the season.
Thank you very much, Bartosz. Magdalena Doksy-Tverberg, Kraków Festival Office. Magdalena, you represent the institution that runs pretty much most of the biggest festival brands in Kraków. How would you respond to this question? Not an easy job, I'm sure.
I'm representing Kraków Festival Office, the institution I'm working from February this year. And I feel a big mission in front of me to change the image of this institution. The institution itself organizing a couple of festivals from the classical music field, old music and contemporary music. but also on the literature field. And all those festivals are profiled as international events with international artists and international public. I'm a musicologist from my education, and before I was
Comes in handy, I would imagine.
And before I was working in a municipality in culture and promotion departments. So I got experience from another side. I support the culture field from this financial solutions. Now I'm on the other side, we can say. And the Kraków Festival office, in my belief, should be, it is already, but I want to say it loud, and I want to profile the institution as an open institution, accessible, inclusive, and very open for all the cooperation. We started such a strategy program together with City of Krakow called Kraków Culture. We try to present culture in terms of seasons, and there is all kind of culture events going on in Krakow. So you are all invited to be on this platform, and I hope we can plan this cooperation together, not only based on the financial term, but also on the logistic and our human sources.
Thank you so much. Last but not least, we have Robert Piaskowski, City Mayor's Plenipotentiary. When I told him he would have only 90 seconds to respond to this question, he
What
said,
the cruelty.
impossible. So let me switch on the stopwatch for the last time in this discussion. Robert, the floor's yours.
You are really very cruel, Lucas, but the answer is very simple. This is the answer. Working with people like those great leaders of different festivals is the main reason, of course, but I'm saying not to flatter all of you here, but just to show my philosophy of working for festivals, because I was literally I've been growing up with festivals, firstly in NGO environment and internationally in Baden-Baden, Wiesbaden, Aix-en-Provence, as an artist, producers, but also before Magdalena took a position of a director, I was also program director for many years at Kraków Festival. And still I'm artistic director of Film Music Festival, which has been growing into a great platform for media music. And I'm still curious. I still, one of my favorite movies is Constant Gardener. So it's about that. It's about taking care, about looking after. It's about providing impulses, about connecting, but also about being grateful what we've been developing over the years, because this city is amazing. It has created, without any knowledge, any references, amazing festivals, habitat, great international brands, and multitude of small-scale events. But they all create atmosphere. They really express the city, its legacy, its heritage, its creativity, and they really build society which is a resilient society because of that. And also festivals have this amazing, outstanding force to change districts, abandoned areas, position of Polish theater abroad, bringing new voices into the cinema, testing different formats and bringing audiences from all of the world to Kraków. And that's why I'm still curious, and I'm still working together with you, very grateful that you change this city every day.
Thank you very much, Robert. Now that our audience understand the Kraków context and the diversity of the festivals our guests are in charge of, let us go back to the European and perhaps even global perspective. Kathrin, there's been a lot of talking about the negative impact of the past 2 years, and well, given the situation in Ukraine and Poland is especially relevant, and the complexity of the impact of these two factors is much bigger, of course. But if we were to look at some of the positive changes or impact factors of the past 2 years, what would you describe as the top 3 most important positive changes, like untapped potential that is only now being discovered?
Thanks for the question. I like to be in this 90 seconds framework and the top 3 kind of questions, because it limits us really to give some to the point thoughts and share some to the points. Points. It's clear that, as you say again in your introduction now, that the biggest trends, I think, in festivals are always embedded in trends and in the challenges that the world as such is facing. You mentioned Ukraine and Corona and things like that. So the world in a way is under continual construction, and us in this world taking a place, a relevant place, hopefully are faced with that. But for sure, one of the most important trends is the technological evolution, I would say, and the post-Corona times that brought these technological evolutions, but also really new relations to audiences into the spotlight. For now, what we face is questions of often very practical nature when it comes to audiences. And we've experienced this summer. Many halls stayed half filled or not entirely filled. And there is a need for building new relations to audiences. And it seems to be at least a certain fear of audiences, or they got used to a different kind of habit to enjoy digital works more so than the live experience in a festival. And also the formats as such changed. We have more small-scale performances, maybe coming to your houses and going into the streets, rather open-air events versus the inside theater concert hall kind of scale of performances. But all this somehow, as with a positive impact for me, is that for many festivals, this audience development issue is not just a question anymore of just growing more audiences and filling halls, but it's really becoming a question of, and it was mentioned before, of community building, of bringing a safe space of joy to people. And also, as I said before, thanks to technological things, involving and interacting with audiences becomes something much more important. And I think that has a really huge creative potential. Maybe to mention one more trend, it is, I think, that sustainability, of course, is a big topic that we cannot look away from, and it needs to be a topic. Many festivals really have taken up a lot of effective actions already, embedding environmental sustainability actions into their operations, into their creative work, into practices, business practices. And that means really that they adapt their organization, they appoint someone sometimes in their team responsible for environmental initiatives, they are creating dedicated sustainability budgets for their events, they measure their carbon footprints, they think about internationalization in a new way. How many flights can we book? How big should a company be? How long should they stay? And all this, I think, again, as a creative potential, is a new way of taking time and implementing time in a festival. And related to a city, I think it is very important to say that a truly sustainable ecological practice really means looking at it holistically, not just to measure carbon footprint. And it costs money as well to be green.
It no doubt does. Do you mind if I make it a little bit more difficult for you and ask you a trickier question, which is part of it? If you were to think about the past 2 years in particular, and think of just one thing that you're happiest about, proudest of, as far as how this festival landscape has changed in Europe and what it has done for the communities, because ultimately it's about some kind of impact, no matter how we define it.
Well, it didn't go down, first of all. It was hard. I think festivals were hit mostly. It didn't go down, it survived. The festival community survived, it adapted, it has shown flexibility, it has come up with new creative ways of bringing arts to audiences. There is these kind of television programs that we do now, online stages that have been set up in a short period of time, new friendships. The community amongst festival makers has been, I think, very much tightened in this time. The understanding of working together between different sectors, the arts, the health sector, the economical sector, because we are all interested in a healthy community, I think has been strengthened. So that is probably something to be quite proud of.
No doubt, and I would imagine it's a bridge also of sorts, because when you look back to the beginnings of European Festivals Association 70 years ago, it actually started at a time where much of Europe was piles of rubble in the post-war era. So I suppose that mission is repeated now in a more symbolic sense, isn't it?
It is repeated now. It is repeated, I think, more or less every day somewhere in the world. We don't just need to look to Ukraine, but of course this is on our doors here in Europe, and Poland is taking such a big responsibility and task, I think, to be there for people coming from Ukraine and helping these people. It's in the DNA, I think, of the arts and cultural community, of people that normally engage in arts and culture, want this world to be a better place, and they're in favor of communities and societies to be supported through the arts and give them a joy in the arts, a smile on their face. So I think that this is something that festivals have always been doing. In particular, I think when it comes, I mean, we cannot stop any war and we cannot stop any conflict. At least I don't believe that we can, but we can be there in this time, and we can in particular be there after this time, when it comes back to reconciliation, or when it comes back to finding a way to have trust in life, to have trust in other people, to have trust again in other cultures, languages, expressions, and so forth. So I think there's a huge task ahead of us every day, basically, but now in particular, when it comes to Europe and the war situation.
I suppose it's always good to have a huge task ahead of you instead of behind you. Is always more inspiring to have something like that in the future. My next question is going to be much tougher. So can I come back with the question I just asked Kathrin to this group? And for the housekeeping arrangements, let's agree that we can all interrupt one another whenever we please, add additional comments. But if you were to look at the past 2 years from the perspective of positive change, has it opened your eyes to something new, something different, through the prism of festivals and your daily activities? Who would like to address this question?
Well, I can start. I have to say that the last 2 years were particularly hard for all the festivals all around the world, and some of the festivals, especially in 2020, all of them basically went online. But if I were to say what's like the major positive aspect of like festivals going online is like more accessibility to like people who were excluded before from the festival life, like people from small towns, countryside, but also the disabled. And I feel like because some of the festivals, especially film festivals, they still organize some screenings that are all online, and that's what we did this year too. I feel like it engages like more and more groups and people who had been excluded from the regular festival life before.
So essentially it's about diversity and inclusion in a broader sense.
And accessibility.
And accessibility. Thank you. Very interesting point. Bartosz.
Well, so I don't know if it's very positive, but it's, if you realize something, it is positive, because it's just even.
If you don't know if it's positive, it's no doubt going to be interesting.
Yeah,
at least.
but and this integration is a chance to reorganization and asking the basic and fundamental questions again. So it was it gave this impact to every leader on cultural field. But that's what I would like to say, that this Corona was the only symptom of very big crisis of the leadership in Europe, and also it remained me, and this is very positive, that I'm absolutely certain myself that this is time for strong visionary leadership, also on culture field. No technocrats anymore. The result of the coronavirus is at the time of the technocrats' imagination, that they cannot really afford leading people through this and taking people through this difficult time, because you can do it only with new description of your position, not regulations, not only fear and politeness and opportunistic position. This is very important. We have to remain again and repeat that culture is a challenge, and culture is a confrontation, and culture is deposition, not confirming the position. And I think it's very challenging, and it gives the power to many people, that this is also kind of a responsibility of people who are in the art field.
Very interesting perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I share that vision with Bartosz, but at the same time, looking at the totally positive outlook, which I see among all the challenges, the challenge of leadership. I feel that what for me was the most opening thing was actually like the access and acceleration of the development of technological tools, which at the same time they bring a lot of danger to how we share data, how we monetize data, and find ways to sustain and develop our practices and activities via sharing what we do. And I feel this is a process that has a lot of shadowy dangers behind it, like, you know, all the tools.
Like in the news media, where you measure every minute and how it impacts your audience, graphs, etc.
No, I was rather thinking about platform capitalism. That's like that we all fight with, or not fight with, but we are dependent on. Because like outside of like our local and national governments, we are ultimately controlled, and the way we share our data and our culture is ultimately controlled by large corporations that own our data, such as Facebook's. I'm talking about social media mainly. And
so this is what happens when you ask Małgorzata for a positive outcome of the past 2 years.
Yeah, it is actually positive, because it made us aware that actually we dependent on those platforms and what we do and the energy that we create around our positive entertainment and festivals as places of, you know, meeting and like kind of cutting loose as well, or discovering new things, are also places of value and socio-political change. Actually, those communities, even though they meet like to, you know, spend some time, discover new artists, they're also places where ideas grow and where discourse is being led. So, I mean, I'm just talking also about Unsound, where we, outside of just the program of the performance program and entertainment program, we also have a really big discourse program where we talk and discuss the context of where we put those things, where culture and art happens. And yeah, going back to the positive thing, I love the fact that we can actually use those new tools, experiment with them, see if they work, and also notice the loopholes and the dangers that those tools come from, so we can adapt them and use them for our benefit. So yeah, ultimately our festivals platforms are serving us to move forward with that.
Małgorzata, I'm sure you will agree with me that if there's one thing that humanity has learned after the past 2 years, it has infinitely improved our ability to complain about things, which was already in good shape before the pandemic, wasn't it?
I wasn't complaining at all.
Not at all, yes, thank you so much. Magdalena, if you were to comment, yours was a particularly challenging situation, even though, as you said yourself, you started very recently as head of the Kraków Festival Office, but you were pretty close to what was happening in Kraków at that time. Any positive outcomes?
Work in the municipality, we were cooperating with the Kraków Festival Office, of course, and these 2 years, that was, for me personally, but I think for all leaders, that was 2 years of challenges. Basically, all leaders or organizers of the festivals, they are people of action, and these 2 years, paradoxically, force people to be more active than before. In fact, we could not make festivals in the used way, yeah, on the way that we used to do it. We had to think about new solutions. We didn't know how the audience will accept it, and what was difficult for me this year, when we were supposed to come back after pandemic with the Misteria Paschalia in early spring, it was how this festival will be received by the audience, if this audience will show up, if people want to face the culture, if they want to accept the culture. And of course we're doing this great, and we had the publicity, but during time I noticed that this audience changed a lot. And I don't know if you noticed that the last Kraków Live Festival, for me, that was a shocking experience, like a young audience, teenagers.
Shocking in a positive sense, hopefully.
Shocking in, not in a positive way.
Shocking,
you have a group of people who are waiting for the concert and are able to take the concert as a whole prepared piece, yeah, 1 hour piece of a concert. concert is too much for many of the people. Yeah, they are walking between different festivals activities, such as showrooms prepared by sponsors, for example, searching for activities there. Yeah, they came for the festival, and I never experienced something like that before. For me to go for the concert is to wait for the concert and take a part of the concert. Turns out suddenly that young people are searching for something more, and except from two main stages where we had activities not in the same time, it was quite clever from the organizers. We had small such as stages, disco stages, where people were partying with a loud music, and so we had such a multicultural and multi-musical events going on in one place. Yeah, this is the challenge, another challenge that we must face, and in fact, to create events for the publicity.
It's fascinating what you've just said, because it reminds me, I do a lot of public speaking professionally, and initially when I started it at the beginning of the pandemic, people found it very difficult to understand that there is such a huge difference between delivering their presentation online and the way they were used to. So it's just like you're saying, that it's actually the last 2 years of the pandemic seem to have changed the audiences on a deeply psychological level, made them much more prone to expect to be stimulated all the time with a great diversity of stimuli. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but to sum it up, in fact, in 2 sentences, and to finish my statement here.
You see, that's a very good answer to why I asked you to answer the first question in 90 seconds only, because that always improves the discipline.
Yeah, I want to say that this 2 years of a difficult time, which with pandemic, and also the beginning of the war. I think that we live in such times that we need to be creative all the time. We need to react on the reality, on what's happening. It's very good. That's positive. That's exactly positive. That you organize for the festival, you need to have at least 2 scenarios how to act, because you never know if you will be able to play the concert live, or something happened, yeah, you need to cancel in the very last moment or whatever, yeah. So this mobilization to be creative and to think about something more than usual, I think it's very good.
So it sounds like there's a lot more pressure on your shoulders now than in the pre-pandemic world. Is that what you're saying? Thank you very much. I see some people are picking up the microphone.
I just wanted to say something about this, what you mentioned about Krakow Live Festival, because actually I find it really interesting that the way that people consume culture in a different way, because consumption is the word that we should apply to, for example, this model of a festival where you have a showcase or a large outdoor festival. It's very different. It is still great for those things to happen, but at the same time, they are targeted to the audience that consumes and participates in culture in a very different way to what we are, like millennials and older people that we are used to. And I think these people have like a completely different attention span. This is the generation of TikTok, of Instagram Reels, and places where content doesn't last longer than 15 seconds.
Exactly what I was talking about, yes.
And I don't necessarily think it's bad. I don't think we should be boomers that say, oh, this is bad. It was better in the past. I think we should look at how actually we can access these audiences with the way we present our art and like kind of, reach out to them, because I think the way they participate in culture has changed forever. And I think we will be adapting to that speed rather than, going back to the old ways, let's say, which doesn't mean there is no space for larger discussion or participation in durational performances and stuff, because people still want that. It's just different audiences and different offers.
Magda, you were going to say something?
Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted to say. Maybe if I didn't speak it up, it was just that shocking in a positive way, but also this is for us a challenge to produce and to give culture for those who want to take it in their way. Yeah?
Magdalena, I'm really glad that we have eventually migrated from shocking in the negative way to shocking in the positive way about the same topic. It's a very good outcome. Yes.
I just would like a little bit warn, because we have to also remember that we have to fight for what we believe. I mean, it's not only that we are just like a stream and we have to, because talking about something we imagine it is quite risky in culture. In culture, you propose something and you convince people also to that. You are not following all the trends, etc. You have to be very careful. You're watching around. You're very sensitive. But in natural is that you have to be also stubborn. You have to be controversial in that respect. Because in other case, you are indifferent. And indifferent is the worst thing happening in culture. So for my experience is what I was very happy about it and surprised, telling the truth, that my online edition, the first COVID time, was over 40,000 followers in online, which we didn't expect. It created Play Kraków, I think, as subscribers, as a first moment of big impact of audience. So it showed me.
Give us some reference before the online edition. How many?
No, there was no online edition before. It was the first online edition.
But before that, on site, how many guests would you have at Divine Comedy?
Well, it's around 3,000 people.
3,000. So that gives
uncomfortable. I still believe that the direct confrontation is very important, and most important. And but it was this signal that sometimes symbolic communication. I mean, something which is not direct, but it's going around in the air, is very, it's just attractive people if it's, let's say, really powerful. And I think that was the reason that so many people just jumped into the program. And that what I'm now watching, we have a summertime production in my theater going on, and they are full house, and 3 hours performance is absolutely overbooked, and people are there. So it is also the quality and also the this time being that people also, they are going for TikTok, but they are also, you need something different. And we cannot forget.
Well, I also think it depends on the medium. It's like different with theater and cinema, and I would say it's like completely different with like musical events and concerts.
Mm-hmm. Truly. Janusz, may I try and do the impossible and also ask you to give us a positive perspective on what...
Everything is positive.
Positive perspective.
I was in shock what happened, of course. It happens many times in the past. No one promised us a paradise except one of the rabbi, even he wasn't a rabbi, but it was over 2,000 years ago. So it is what it is, and we have taken it, and we have faced it. And I think that Kathrin is right. The most important achievement is that the festivals didn't go down, and we could maintain that even more and reach it. As a man who was born on the edge of the 18th and the 20th centuries, I am not very familiar with all these technological achievements, but I appreciate it, of course. So I was a little bit worried because the Jewish Culture Festival is about a meeting. And about a meeting with the people, and this reaction, this energy which is flowing all the time. And suddenly we're cut of that. But we put a program on the what is it? Website. Okay, can be website. Whatever it is called, website. Thank you. I have to write it down. And speaking about the numbers, which I hate, honestly speaking. Only one of the concerts which we prepared together with one of the giant of the Jewish music from New York, Frank London, was watched by the 300,000 people. It was just amazing because basically we are happy to have totally like 30,000 people maybe. But what we lost, it was this intimate meeting between people, because the festival is created not only by the musicians or the scholars or the just people who are bringing the living culture to Poland, but it is also created by the so-called audience. But there is a lot of issues which is crossing my mind right now. We always have a choice once again, the choice between the power of idea and idea of power. In this country, in Europe, in all the world, people are overwhelmed by idea of power. We want to win, we want to murder you. Go to hell. And we are focused on the power of idea. And what director of this beautiful theater festival just said, we need the strong people who are the visionary, the leaders with a visionary, and all of us are the people of visionary. And I want to say only one thing. I don't believe, but it's my faith, but all who are sitting right now, we think that we are dedicate the festival to the audience, to the people, to the idea. No. We've been doing it, and we're doing it, first of all, because of ourselves. I've always emphasized that I'm most important icon and a center of this festival, because this is what overwhelmed me all the time. I'm thinking about the Jewish culture, the living Jewish culture, and I want to spread my idea. I want to connect with this idea with the other people. But first of all, I have to know who I am. Who I am, the Jewish Culture Festival, and as well, all the festivals we are running is about our identity, the cultural identity, of course. It doesn't mean that we are Poles or, no, I don't know, Germans, or just the power of idea. It's something that drives me all the time when I think about the present day and the future, of course. So I don't care about pandemic. Till they don't want to shoot us, yalla, we can leave.
Very interesting perspective. It's interesting, though, Janusz, that given your response, when I asked you the why question, your response was, I have to sleep over that one. Janusz also mentioned that he hates numbers, which brings me to a yes or no kind of a question.
Let me tell you only one thing. Why I hate numbers? I remember many years ago, after one of the great concerts done by the, once again, icon of the Yiddish music and song, Theo Bickel, on Szeroka Street for the at least 15,000 people. After the concert, we stood on the backstage, and one of the journalists approached us. And he was a guy from the very famous newspapers, which I strongly don't like, New York Times. And he started to yell on Theo Bickel, why are you coming to Poland? How many Jews left in Poland? For whom are you singing? And Theo looked at him and said, young man, this is not the issue of mathematics. This is the issue of ethic. And this is about our festivals also.
A wonderful answer, no less. On a more humorous note, I suppose, the only time when festival organizers don't hate talking about numbers is when talking to sponsors. I suppose that would be that would be the only opportunity. Robbers, I'm sure that's the kind of question you would like to respond to.
I was keen whether someone will say it doesn't concern budgets, of course, for festivals.
Exactly.
Of course, it's very...
We have given you a lot of time to come up with positive outcomes of the past year.
You know, only positives, because, yes, someone said never waste good crisis, and it was good crisis, because it has accelerated many processes we've been trying to change, to make institutions, festivals, all of the actors on the cultural stage more upset, more interested in sustainable development goals or climate change, transformation needs to be more inclusive, and so on, and so on. Sometimes we run, and in Kraków we know very well what does it mean, like headless chicken without directions. It's like carousel of events, and suddenly we've discovered that this is not about events at all, that festivals are not fireworks, that the word festivalization, which was an accusation, some people said that cities should maybe rethink its festival policy. And suddenly we discovered...
Rethink meaning cut, obviously.
Yes, or limit. And we've understood how connected are festivals with all of the aspects of the social, economic, urban life of a city, how many people are employed, how much they contribute to the local economy, how they create cheap and very efficient internationalization of the city, promotion equivalent, but also what is important, really ties which transform our minds through ideas, through trust, through democracy. During the pandemic lockdown, we've got Festival of Democracy in Poland with protests, with strikes, and they did use festival tools, festival way to express themselves, and that was fascinating. So festivals mean democracy. There is no festivals in the states or countries where there is no freedom of speech, where human rights are not an issue, and so on. So to me, it was obvious always, but we haven't had really proofs. So talking about proofs, numbers,
so it is a challenge to make it sound more tangible, especially to a layman, someone who doesn't live festivals every day of their lives and is not interested. So would you say that the past 2 years have improved your defensive skills in that sense? Because historically, whenever there is a major crisis, cut culture first. That's the impulse of many governments, isn't it?
No, that was in contrary in Kraków. We did add a lot of money. Mayor of Kraków decided to really. That was the first challenge, to protect the jobs, to keep things going, to protect festivals also in long term. That's why this year we decided to protect festivals in 5 years guarantees, which allows them to grow. They have really stable situation here in municipality, talking about budgets. From the other hand, we've developed different tools. Magdalena mentioned Kraków Culture Policy. This is exactly what we wanted to create, the common responsibility to really work collectively on the image of the city, to really provide the message abroad. Yes, this is not only about one art, one industry, one topic only. This is about fascinating interplay between past and future, about history and contemporary issues. And it's also about togetherness. It's what you've discovered during the Kraków Live Festival. But this togetherness, it's one of the most beautiful element of the Jewish Culture Festival. Janusz mentioned Shalom, which is a great moment of reconciliation, of being together, even if we are different. And the other thing during the pandemic, the open tent on the streets, without big productions, without big noise, just a place where people sit together, discuss, share, and yes, they recover. Because I think this is the force of the festival. They help us to be together, even if we are different. And also festivals have this force to build the trust, which is a very important aspect we do really need to rebuild on different levels.
I'm sure, like all of us in this room, I've been to many editions of Jewish Culture Festival, and one of the key words I would think of, I would mention here, would be openness, as you mentioned yourself. The openness that was made more literal in the past 2 years, which brings me to the difficult question I promised you. But before I get there, let me come back to Kathrin for a while. Kathrin, 2 questions for you. One super easy and one potentially super difficult. Which one do you choose first?
You choose.
I'll start with the super difficult one to get it over with. Imagine you're talking to someone who's really skeptical about festivals, especially in the face of very tangible crises that they can see, experience, because it's related to food and daily bread and possibilities, etc. So festivals sound more abstract at a time like this, possibly redundant. So could you try and persuade a skeptic that it's not an illusion, that jointly cooperating together, festivals can achieve something that they wouldn't be able to achieve independently? In other words, is it not an illusion or wishful thinking that cooperation actually creates impact?
You should, when you ask this question, for instance, to Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson is telling you, fuck the EU, we don't need the European Union, we can go out, somebody would need to reply to him, no, the European Union is an essential element for all the British citizens, to stay together. There is no such argument that we can actually give to any British citizen, and they voted against the European Union, that European Union needs to exist. And the same is true for all collective. When you ask about collectives, why they exist and how essential they are and that we cannot survive without them, you could say, mathematically, I cannot justify the existence of any collective as such. But my reply to that is it's a mindset. You cannot mathematically maybe measure why the European Union should exist, but there is so many arguments and ideas and essential elements that tell us that the connection between people, the connection between communities, the connection between countries and so forth delivers so many results or so many impacts that if it wasn't existing, it would be created. Something, for instance, like IFA, I always am asked the question, what is the benefit, what is the need of such a collective that exists for 70 years? And of course, the only reply is not to say, well, if it wasn't there, it would need to be created. But I'm sure that it would need to be set up if it wasn't there.
Thank you very much, which brings me to the next, the easy question. One of the main reasons why we're meeting here today is something called Europe for Festivals, Festivals for Europe SEAL. What is it? Can you explain it to the broader audience, please?
Well, I don't know if it's easy, because sometimes also that is not an easy exercise to explain European projects somehow on a European level, because it seems indeed somehow like something very remote from the local level. But I listened very carefully.
That the word European is a synonym to difficult, to challenging.
Exactly. Somehow it has this negative connotation. No, but I listened. Yeah, what is the scene? I listened very carefully to everything that was said, and I just noted down some of the words when listening to you. What festivals do by giving artists and arts a platform. I will just mention some words that were just all mentioned. They contribute to the reflection in society. They contribute to controversies, to community building, to joy. They deliver content. They have the power of ideas. They are visionary messages. They contribute to inclusion, to intimacy, and all these things. And I'm not even here speaking about any of those numbers that many people can say as well. They contribute to cultural tourism, have an economic impact. Every euro is having a return of 10 euro, blah, 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 that is spent. No, I'm not even mentioning any of all that. All these things, these values that I just mentioned, joy, community, and so forth, show this immense potential and power that festivals have. If this is combined, this huge potential of festivals and the power of this machinery of a festival with the openness of festival makers, and I think all these that are sitting there have this openness, and also the need for festival makers then to connect this potential to something beyond the festival making. And there, in the first place, I think of a city, then I think a festival is very mature, because it's not sitting there on an island producing something for its own sake. So the city is, in a way, the most natural partner for every festival to talk to. It's embedded in the same community. It's citizens of a city and the visitors visiting a city. So cities, on the other hand, are very eager to connect with festivals for many reasons that I mentioned above. So you can almost, like a schabloon, put the offers that a festival has and the needs, and also the offers that a city has on top of each other. And not just be in a relationship with each other to ask for money or in a competitive kind of run behind the little cents that a city can offer, even though we know that 80% in Europe's festivals' lives is subventioned by the city level, not by national governments or by regional governments, 80%. So if there is on both sides, city level and festivals level, a genuine wish and readiness to work together beyond being in relation when it comes to money, I think there is a golden match between these two. And the FSC basically offers a context for festivals and for cities to be in touch in this kind of relationship, to recognize each other, use potential, learn from each other. And it will be, it was the city of Krakow, city of Leeuwarden, city of Ljubljana, Belgrade, Edinburgh, Rotterdam, and others, that Bergen in Norway, that came up with the idea. It was the cities that knocked on IFA's doors and said, can we do something together in relation to festivals in order to show the potential as a city through its festivals to be together. So these cities now together in Yerevan next month will launch the FSC, and I'm happy that Krakow is part of it, and that this discussion in a way is also nourished by this thinking of cities taking responsibility towards their festivals beyond just giving them money and using them for different purposes.
What the European Festivals Association is, I would imagine, proud of is its educational initiatives as well, and not only certifying initiatives, if I may call it that way, like the seal, which you will be signing very soon, I suppose. Just to put things in perspective, how many partner festivals do you already have across Europe? What's the figure? Just help everyone imagine how big the number is.
Yeah. By the way, every process that we label as certifying, like the FA label, for instance, some of the festivals sitting on the table there know, is also a knowledge sharing and an exercise of not training, but of being together and learning from each other. The certification behind is just a marketing issue. And it's important, of course, but I think it's just a stamp, and it should lead to something much more substantial than carrying a label. But behind IFA, there is an open conversation with festivals all across the world going on, a communication with around 3,000 festivals, of which there is 100 really paying IFA members that are allowing IFA to initiate training programs with young festival managers. There is some 1,000 alumni from 88 different countries that participated, and many, many more conversations going on around festivals.
3,000 festivals, that's an impressive figure, I would imagine.
Well, it's not a figure of paying festivals on the IFA membership. Thanks to IFA members such as Bartosza Festival, we can do a lot of initiatives that go beyond serving our members, but that go into offering trainings and issues like that.
Thank you very much, Kathrin. And I promised you a tough question, so let's go with it. We're here in Krakow talking also about Krakow. We also know cities all over the world that have the so-called one festival issue. In other words, the cities where those festivals are based are known for little else than this festival, right? We know such cities and townships. Krakow clearly doesn't have this issue or this problem. But my question is, does it have the opposite problem? Too many festivals taking place in the city? And if yes, why should it be important, or why should it be a risk, potentially?
Can I start?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't think that there's such a thing as like having too many festivals, which goes kind of well with what Robert had said before. Because
so even if you have a festival every second day and someone needs to produce
maybe not every second day, but I don't know like a single city or town in the world that has a festival every second day. But if there's a big
let
number,
me think, Grzegorz. I think it's called Kraków.
Well, it doesn't happen every second day, but I don't think it's a problem. I think except for like the long list of like advantages and pluses that Kathrin also mentioned, and like economical reasons, cultural reasons, educational reasons, and advantages that the festivals give, so to speak, to the city, we often forget about like fun and like kind of like ways to spend like leisure time and free time, which is also an important kind of matter in the democratic societies. So I don't think there's such a thing as like having too many festivals, although it could be problematic in terms of like organizational stuff, but I feel like there's room for everyone. Same with like film festivals. I often get asked this question, like whether I think there's like too many film festivals in Poland right now or in Europe in general, but my answer is there's lots of films to like promote and give platform to, and everyone's gonna like get something, and like everyone's gonna have their chance to like, you know, either watch a film that they really like or to promote a film or create a platform to promote a film. So I see it maybe like kind of naively as a good thing.
Grzegorz, I would recommend that you read at least one Facebook post of the city mayor's plenipotentiary before a random summertime weekend when Robert Piaskowski explains to a larger audience what's going to happen this weekend. And even if there were 5 of you, I'm sure you would not be able to be at every event. But when we talk about festivals, we obviously mean...
Robert does.
We don't only mean the sophisticated big formats, we also mean the very small ones catering to smaller audiences like the Festival of Pierogi or whatever you want to choose, right? So there's a great diversity of festivals catering to very different needs, and that's a good thing. We all agree. Now, obviously, I did ask you about the positive aspect, so we can just as well continue. Does everyone agree? Małgorzata, do you agree? It's a good thing. We are at exactly the right level of saturation of festivals in Kraków. Not one more, not one less. Perfect.
Not really. I mean, I think like the problem is rather the definition rather than the amount of things happening. Because I think, what do we call a festival? Is Festival of Pierogi, which you've mentioned, the same value as Divine Comedy? I think to some people it could be. Yeah, I love pierogis and I love theater, but I don't know, like, what's the level?
Not together.
Huh?
So essentially, Małgorzata, what you're saying is that all of a sudden we call Unsound a congress rather than a festival. It solves our problem?
I don't really like using the name festival to describe Unsound anymore. Like, I rather use the name platform.
Is it after this conversation or before?
No, that was a long time before, because I feel the word festival is pretty devaluated, because now, like, we call Festival of Wine, Festival of Portuguese cheese in Biedronka is called a festival. I mean, I think so. I don't know, maybe it was Lille or something. But you know what I mean? Like, I think it's...
I do, because that's partly why I hate the word host or MC in Polish.
Yeah, but I think it's important to kind of maybe regroup events such as festivals in a certain way and find ways of differentiating between them. I don't think the Festival of Bread is a bad thing. I think it should happen, because I think it's also showcases a certain part of culinary culture that we have in the region and so on. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing that we have so many of those events.
I have to admit it to you. You have just used a very smart way of circumventing my question and not answering. In other words, do we have too many festivals, regardless of how we define them and what category we put them under? Do you think the city, as an organization like Kraków Festival Office and all the supporting bodies producing those festivals? Because remember,
I think we have too many festivals.
These are not...
Absolutely, and we've talked about it a lot also. Like,
so we do have too many.
I think so.
And what's too many? How many should we have?
I think it depends.
For a city of Kraków size.
I think the city of Krakow, and together with like other cultural independent scholars, researchers, should sit down and think up and evaluate all of the events and the way that that the cultural policy is made. And it's not a question of the number; it's a question of quality and the purpose of what's the purpose of the festivals for the city or for the festivals themselves. So whether it's like a promotional value, because like back in 2008 when I started together with our colleagues, our not-for-profit, the only reason we started it is because the city of Krakow changed the policy and they've decided to support independent festivals run by not-for-profits. And this is literally the reason I'm still doing this, because otherwise I would be a lawyer. So, which I really don't regret. But my point was that I still feel that we should really rethink the way we shape our festivals. What's the problem with the city? And I think the problem is it's also the amount of events that are called festivals, maybe, but rather like a long-term policy on what to do outside of the festivals, because the festivals often are outsourced events where we bring artists and acts from outside instead of looking into and building our local DIY culture, like supporting actors that are not organizing festivals, finding in gentrified spaces such as Krakow and many other capitals that are called festival capitals. We should find spaces for independent activities to rise. We should protect the cities from developers. We should protect the city from, like the neoliberal capitalism. So, sorry.
Wow, that's quite an agenda you've set for us today.
Sorry, I'm not running for the office.
There's been quite a fascinating body language phenomenon going on as you were answering my question. Initially, I noticed that Bartosz started nodding. He was the first one. And after he nodded 10 times, Magdalena nodded twice, and then eventually Grzegorz. But Janusz and Robert didn't nod at all.
I'm going to stop
They're
speaking.
too far.
Bartosz.
But yeah, I think that it's very important, especially your last, I would like to continue, because we must remember that the festival was years ago, maybe even now, was the only one way to get money for activity. For me, the perfect situation is when we have institutions, NGOs, freelance artists able to work. I mean, the vita quotidiana of the art and culture is more important than festivals, which are a little bit this top activity. And it's, this is my dream, to make Krakow really city that people are coming from Warsaw to make a project here, not living from Krakow to do something in Warsaw. This is very important. And therefore, there were so many festivals raised by small NGOs, some private initiatives, just to get some money because it was easier to do it under the name of the festival. Now I understand that it's something's changing, but the problem will be still the same, that we have very big potential of artists here, which feel a little bit not well welcomed in some, or they cannot find the way to develop so we have to work on it very hardly, just to open more institutions, just to to do more diverse projects. I know I absolutely support that we still need this colonization with art, the new districts, which is really powerful tool of completely changing the landscape of the city. My theater is an example of that we had really strong impact of changing the image and narration about Nowa Huta. And there are so many fantastic followers, people who are doing the same things with new ideas, but it was encouraged by one strong example. So this is exactly also the mission of this strong brand or strong institution, just to encourage others to follow this. And we have to remember it. Sometimes festival can do it, but a festival is something different than everyday life, and the everyday life is very important for culture.
Bartosz, but if I were to push you a little towards answering a very simple question, when you look at the landscape of festivals in a city, in an international city like Kraków, do we have just the right number, or in your experience, is it a little too many, or maybe too few?
Well, this is also industry. So I cannot say it's too many, because if I say too many, I realize in one moment that we cut something, and we just cut also some artists from employment, from working. This is the system of employing artists who are not employed in institutions. So this is the way how they earn money for life. So even if I see very amateur festival, badly organized, but with some artists coming, etc., I say, okay, but this is the also critical system. I mean, we are in crisis in some way all the time. With especially culture sector is always trying to reorientate, redefine, etc., etc. So this is the process. So I cannot tell it. I also think that if I say with my position that I should cut some festivals, I a little bit too appreciate myself, because I think that big festivals must be followed by others who are just waiting for the moment to be as powerful as it is. It's just a regular for myself. So if I for all my life was trying to make an open space and looking for new people, for new ideas, I cannot say that I would like to reduce any of the festivals, because
that's a fair
so many
answer.
of them I don't know, and maybe there are treasures
I fully agree. That's why I said with like hooray optimism that there's no such thing, but also like
Gregor, I can only thank you for setting the tone.
Well, no, but to be honest, well, I'm positive. I'm like the queen of the positive thinking, maybe this year. Thank you. Well, anyways, like I wasn't thinking about like festivals, like culinary festivals, because we're here in a certain group. So you clearly put like a broader category to the word festival that I was not thinking about, because by setting up this group, you kind of set up a definition too. That's like also the reason for my hooray optimistic answer. I thought that we were discussing like cultural events and festivals and bigger festivals, or the festivals that are not necessarily like all renowned and distinguished, but that are not like, you know, festivals of like pierogis and soup. Not that I have anything against them, as like Małgorzata said clearly, just to like, you know,
Fair enough.
Shed some light on my answer.
So let's be fair and ask someone. Janusz, allow me just to ask Magdalena first, because Magdalena has been patiently in her centric position listening to your responses, and actually she's the one who, after one festival finishes, she sort of says, "Okay, let's close the paperwork, start working on another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one." Right? So
exactly
does it impact quality? That would be a clear question.
Headless chicken, exactly.
Yeah. So
the problem
clearly
is that
something
you
like that.
Stop to work on one festival and start to work for another. This work is continuously. In fact, it's very difficult in the institution who has also such a process work for environment. Except from festivals, which are festivity in the city, there are some kind of holidays. We treat festivals as a holidays. Of course, we add all the educational stream. We try to be environmental friendly and think about carbon, food, and blah blah blah. All of this we know. Yeah, we some
too many, too few, or just the right number.
I agree that the problem is in a definition. What is the real festival? It must be impact on the environment.
I knew I would get a diplomatic answer. So let me make it easier. How overworked does it make you? In other words, when you go to, say, 17th edition of Divine Comedy as the official guest invited on stage to start the festival, do you say, "Welcome to the 17th edition of the Pierogi Festival" by accident because you have just closed the Pierogi Festival?
Yeah, but Pierogi Festival should not be called festival. And we got this claim this year after festival as a Kraków office. One habitant of our city called finally. I don't know where to address this problem, but do you think that the festival, Pierogi Festival, should be called festival, really? So people also feel that this is not a festival, but I think that it's also very difficult what Bartosz said, that non-profit organizations who are creating the good product events also and got support from the city because basically they live on the city budgets. And when they were supported for 10 years, they already have tradition with organizing a festival, yeah, even if it's a small scale event. And it's very difficult to say to someone, okay, it's enough for you because now we invest in someone big, yeah, something big, or someone who got a bigger budget. It's very difficult. But I think that the problem, what Małgorzata said, it's in evaluation. We don't make such a proper evaluation of the festivals. So basically we don't calculate the impact. We don't have these data that we can...
or not enough of it, or... not the kind of data that allows you to...
We don't have arguments. We should close this one and support this one, for example, because we should work more because the impact is bigger, yeah? Or how to say in English, I don't know.
Which brings me
of it. It's
outreach
just bigger.
or reach. Okay.
Yeah.
Which brings me to another question, Magda, in that context. Do you think the best model for developing city festivals or large festivals in the city is exclusively city funding? Because I remember years ago facilitating a conversation with a member of the city council in Edinburgh, where he said that in Edinburgh it's quite the opposite. It's the private funding that contributes most of the expenses of the festival, and the city funding is only symbolic. So if a huge brand, one of the oldest brands, can be built and continued on a model like this. What would you say about this balance of looking for private investors and basically continuing?
From my perspective, the private fundings are smaller. Mm-hmm. We fight for this money, and it also depends what you can offer to the sponsor. But basically, all of us live on the city money, and we are supported from the city money. If it's not the main budget, it's for sure the crucial part of it. And I see some kind of hope that we can join our forces. Maybe we don't need 3 of alternative music festivals. We should make, but we try to do this. We tried to do this 2 years ago. Basically, each of us also feel independent in some way and want to work on its own brand, yeah, created and
absolutely
exactly. So this is also very difficult, such a process to reunion, but I think it's very important that we see each other, that we can respect each other, that we can see possibilities of cooperation, that
and if you give audiences the choice, they always want to have more of it, not less of it.
Also, and we know that we have audience who follow the festival, so I think this is the most important.
The number one yardstick, after all. Thank you very much, Magdalena.
Can I just add one thing about the private funding? Because that's, I think, the problem that we are facing, like sitting here, maybe except off camera, that has all these glamorous actors and actresses and attracts so many amazing partners. But the problem is that on the national level, I don't think there is enough of legal solutions for the private and public sector to cooperate together, and the private companies don't see any benefit or don't have any benefit, I mean tax benefit or any other benefit, to support culture. Like what we can sell as festivals to those private sponsors is visibility, marketing, solutions, outreach, and so on. And this is not like often part, unless it's like a big company that has the CSR policy. Most companies are just looking to realize their communication campaigns by supporting us. So it's not really like a cultural mecenat as such, which is what cities' role or government's role, because I don't think the festivals should be only funded by the cities. They should be funded on a national level, and those policies should be coherent, not the way they are now. So.
Interesting perspective. Janusz, for a while you've been wanting to say something to the question around whether Kraków has too many festivals, just the right number of festivals, or, maybe too few.
I don't know. First of all, I don't know how many festivals do we have.
Yeah.
Magdalena?
80. Close to 100 if we count pierogi.
Okay. Let's stop victimizing pierogi.
I don't know what to say. Just what came to my mind right now, I came to Krakow in 1980, and Krakow, especially this main market square full of life nowadays, and during the night was totally empty. I don't remember any festival except maybe one jazz festival that time. And nowadays we are facing and struggling with a problem which is very well known as the embarrassment of the riches. It's very good. It's better than 30 years ago in Krakow, where we had only one festival. So quality, mentioned by Magda, it's absolutely the numero uno. If we'll maintain our festivals on the highest artistic and intellectual level, I'm more than sure that whoever will be the president or mayor of Krakow, he will give us a support which means, Roberto, money, Geld, Kesef. We are talking about the power of idea.
You said you don't like
wonderful,
figures.
but what can we do with our idea without the power of money?
Janusz, thank you for such an emphatic. I was especially looking forward, Janusz, to hear your answer, given the fact that you started your festival before Steven Spielberg's crew came to Kraków in 1990.
Don't mention this name, young man. I tell you why, because this is one of the examples, I'm sorry, Spielberg came to Krakow and suddenly all the world, after the Schindler's List, believed that Jews were born only, Krakowian Jews were born only for the one reason, to be saved by Oskar Schindler. Are you kidding me, man? Are you kidding me, man? So the Jewish Culture Festival
Janusz, the last thing I want to do in the last 3 minutes of our conversation is open the Pandora's box. So.
Oh yeah, right. I'm sorry, I have to go. Right.
It's all right.
I have a meeting with your German priest right now, who are very curious about the
I would very much love to continue that conversation offline, but let me go back to Robert, because we first of all need to establish if it is 80 festivals or closer to 100 festivals. Because if it's closer to 100 festivals, I was actually pretty close to Grzegor's response that maybe not every second, but every third day we have a festival.
First of all, I need to say that we have with Janusz same impression that next time we will sit closer to you, so we will have more space to answer all of the questions. But yes, he likes more this part of the table.
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, in case you didn't know, that's what a garage sounds like.
But being serious, I think that question asked if there is too many is very wrong questions. It's exactly about, do you like markets, Łukasz?
Markets?
Yes.
I do.
Kleparz, great markets. So you think they're on this market, apples, potatoes and eggs should be sold in one stance only? We like diversity, we like pluralism. The only limit is, of course, resources, attention, capacity of a city and also its inhabitants. But we've created a wonderful, resilient environment, because our audiences are mainly based on local inhabitants. 80% of the audiences are inhabitants of Kraków, which shows how high is a cultural capital of the city.
And which made the city's festivals resilient.
But if you let me continue, I think that we should work collectively on criteria and to set a strategy for Festival City together, just to really shape the future of the global brands you've guys we've created together. Collectively, to have at least direction, to have at least response to our complex contemporary crisis. And I think, and this is very important to me, that Kraków has been invited, Kathrin, to the FSCL development process, because it was very inspiring, and also I think it's inspiring for our festivals together. What values are behind? What are the global trends? What are the benefits of working collectively with the city? Not waiting for the city's decision for money, for, I don't know, location, but really to establish some sort of common values. And I will say that I like Pierogi very much. We did help Pierogi Festival to change into very aesthetic, locally rooted event. And we need to see Pierogi in larger context, in all of the different festive celebrations which has been around. And of course, Pierogi doesn't have one unique and loyal community together, but they are important part of larger picture.
Robert, you do realize that if you use the word pierogi once more, we will have to ask the production team to change the title of this conversation.
It's a round table, so dumplings are very relevant.
Thank you so much also for explaining to our international audience what pierogi are in English. That should have been done earlier in this debate. Yes, I started this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, we started this conversation with Kathrin's voice, and let us end it with Kathrin's voice. Kathrin, are you still there? I'm sure you are.
I'm following.
My last question. I opened this discussion talking about the power of connections. And when I think about it in the most tangible sense, I see Ukrainian artists coming to Kraków many years ago, poets, instrumentalists, singers, writers, and were it not for those connections built among others through festivals, I'm quite sure the world's response to the Russian aggression in Ukraine would have been a very different one. Would you like to give us a closing comment, given the title of our conversation?
Wow, that was such a nice closing comment. What can be nicer than the words that you have shared? Yeah, that is the essential part, I think, about festivals and the connection that festivals can offer. Actually, not festivals, but the arts, and festivals as an instrument to give arts and the artists a platform. That is this essential contribution of sharing human stories, sharing human energy, human creativity, artistic creativity with each other through the lens or through the eyes of an artist. I think it's the most beautiful opener for our minds and our hearts to be empathetic and to understand the needs and the offers of the other one. And I mean, Krakow and Poland at the moment is showing this so well, to respond to the needs of the other and to welcome people to your houses, your homes, to your environments, your communities that come from somewhere else and will go back to somewhere else. And at the same time they live. They have their contribution to societies now in Krakow and in other places. So even though Corona is not a good moment to have a crisis, and the war is nothing. There is nothing good about the war, and we don't need to learn by war that we need these bridges. But it shows, once again, that humanity can be very close through the tools and the instruments of the arts and through festival people and makers.
Kathrin Deventer, Secretary General, European Festivals Association. Thank you very much, Kathrin, for being with us and for contributing to this debate. And as the only outsider in this conversation, allow me to thank you also for decades of soul healing experiences in the festival formats that you represent here. Thank you very much. All the best. Stay healthy. Stay safe.